I'm Lora with Red Desert Violin, and I'm here today for virtual sheet music to talk about the squeaky or the whistling E string on our violins. We all experience it at some point. Sometimes it gets so severe though that it's really interferes with our playing. And there's a lot of things that contribute to this, and about 7 or 10 of them are not your fault. They're just little equipment issues that you can easily fix and deal with. There's a couple things that if you're doing them, then it is your fault and you'll have to fix it in your playing, but they're not a big deal. So let's start with the things that are not your fault, because that's a lot more fun if you have something to blame it on. So the first cause of the squeaky E is if you allow excess rosin buildup on your string. If you've got that white crusty, just white crust on your string, scrape it off with your fingernail or with a penny, and try to keep your strings wiped off, because that can definitely inhibit the vibration of the E string and cause it to whistle. All right, second cause of the squeaky E string is this E string tube, the sleeve that comes with every E string. Can you see that? It's there to protect your bridge, so you want it between the bridge and your E string, but don't let it sit too far forward. A lot of people don't realize it and they let it sit forward, and that totally, it's like playing with someone's finger on your string. It's going to inhibit the vibration a lot, and that's probably one of the worst causes of the squeaky whistling E string. So keep it back as far as you can so you're still protecting your bridge, but you're not experiencing that interference. Another cause of the squeaky E is if your bridge is not situated properly. Our bridges are not glued to our violin, and when we tune or when the weather changes, they move around, and when we tune it can drag the bridge forward. So you need to constantly inspect your bridge, make sure that it's straight up, that it's not leaning forward or backwards. Make sure that it's absolutely straight on the violin, not crooked this way or that way, and the feet roughly line up with the notches in the F holes. Another big cause of the squeaky whistling E is just weather changes. And there's only so much you can do about that, because the weather is going to change seasonally. When your heat first comes on for the first time in the winter, your violin goes through an adjustment period because that dries out the air. You might want to consider humidifying at that time, or you might not. I can't tell you exactly what to do about that, but just be aware that your violin has to adjust when the weather changes. Likewise, when the rainy season hits in some places, the violin absorbs a ton of moisture. I once heard that it was enough moisture to soak a full paper towel wet. That's a lot of water that this little piece of wood can soak up. And that also affects the vibration and the responsiveness of this little wire E string. Another big cause of the squeaky E is if your E string's gone bad. E strings are cheap, so I like to keep a couple spare E strings on hand, and as soon as they start to act weird, I just put a new one on. They can go false so that they sound twangy, or they split into double tones, but even if it sounds like it's okay, sometimes a bad E string can cause the whistling. In addition to a bad E string, the type of E string that you use can add to the whistling. I have always had problems with the gold E string, and I know a lot of people love them for their warmth, but gosh, they whistle on my violins, and I've had them on 2 different violins with the whistling. So I don't use gold E strings. If you use a thick gauge E string, people love those because they're powerful, but they're also harder to get to respond, and they can tend to whistle as well. I just stick with a medium standard gauge E string. All right, you want to inspect your tuner, your fine tuner, on your violin, sometimes those things can get bent, or they're just in a weird position. They get twisted if you accidentally knocked your violin. And if your E string tuner is damaged or bent in some way, that can cause the E string to behave funny. Certain keys on the violin tend to make the E string whistle, and I think it's keys that really emphasize the notes of D. I'm not sure about this, but I know that the key of F major and D minor, I've noticed my E string wants to whistle worse than in other keys. It might be a different key for you, I don't know, but that's why some pieces your E string whistles in and you don't have the problem in other pieces. I think it's related to the key and the vibrational center of certain keys. Now let's talk about the two things in your technique that can create this whistly E string. The two things are a crooked bow and choosing the wrong sounding point for the passage that you're playing in. So obviously we all know that we need to play with the bow parallel to the bridge, and we want to avoid playing crooked this way or that way. And that takes a lot of practice. I encourage my students to practice in a mirror so that they learn what to do with their arm and with their wrist to keep the bow straight. That's just a matter of awareness, observation, and practice. The sounding point takes a little bit of knowledge about what your sounding point does. And if you're playing in a really loud passage where you want lots of power, but you're out here far away from the bridge, your strings are going to struggle to keep up with what you're putting in. And so you want to move closer to the bridge for the powerful passages. Closer to the bridge and keeping the bow straight. If you're playing close to the bridge in a soft, expressive passage, then the strings are going to have a hard time responding with the lighter bow pressure. So there you have it. 7 to 10 things that you can monitor and maintain in your own equipment, and that will eliminate about 90% of those squeaks and whistles. The other 10% can be avoided by making sure that your technique is in shape, that you're navigating with a straight bow, and that you're choosing the appropriate sounding point. We all get a squeaky E now and then, but it's all about knowing what to look for and what to do to prevent it from happening. Feel free to post a question below. I will make sure to answer it personally. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.